Okay boys, I just want to get the boring engineering, definitely is it right, the flow and all that shit bottomed out. So that is essentially how I had my accusump. It was on the return from the cooler, and I'll show you that through the housing at the minute. But what I didn't have, so let's get, and then instead of it being teed in this line here, it was just further over here, so that is the same. But what we didn't have is this check valve here that only allows flow that way. So it's dependent on what you, how you, because people are saying you'll still have engine failure when you're using an accusump, is because the bearings won't die, they're still getting pressure, but what people say is that the oil pump is spinning and it's getting no oil. So obviously the oil pump pumps oil and sends it, but in doing that it lubricates itself. So if it hasn't got any oil, like I think Gary from APT had said, if there's no oil being picked up from the pickup, the oil gear is essentially scratching itself to bits inside the housing because it's getting no oil flow across it. It's not self-lubricating. So the way I've got mine, and I can see how I was only making 4 when my oil pump was in surge and not having to, couldn't send any oil from the pickup. My accusump, my pressure logs on my ECU was only showing about 4 bar, which, when obviously I've had this engine failure, but I don't, it's not attributed to that because we took the bearings out. The bearings were fine. There was no wear whatsoever. So it looks like 4 bar was okay, but this is where it depends on what you think. Is because I didn't have a check valve in here, when there was no oil flow from the pump, the accusump was dumping oil into that line. But what must have been happening is some of it was going to the bearings, and that's where I was getting the 4 bar of pressure from, and some of it was flowing back through the cooler and back into the oil pump and probably into the sump, into the pickup. So reverse flow, if you like. So whilst I like that idea because my oil pump gear is still getting oiled by the reverse flow of oil, my bearings are getting 4 bar, but I think it's reduced. So, but I think the oil in the accusump is getting used quickly because obviously the engine's getting some and we're getting reverse flow back to the oil pump. So it's one of them. It's like if you put a check valve in, you're not going to send oil to your oil pump, but you are going to maintain, probably for a longer period, you'll have oil, you know, stored, and you should have higher pressure to your bearings. So it depends what you want. I'm in two minds still whether I want to fit the check valve and get higher pressure to the bearings from the accusump, or leave the check valve out and I'm getting a volume of oil, because we are using the big accusump. I'm getting a volume of oil about 4 bar. We know it's lower than what, you know, we should be getting, like 6 bar when you're at 6,000, 7,000 RPM. But my engine seems to have been okay on 4 bar, and the tuners are saying you only need your cut down to sort of 3 bar. So it depends what you think about here, is whether you want oil to go back, or if you put a check valve in, I think you're going to get maintain a higher pressure, but no oil to your pump while you're in that surge, which should only be for, you know, a real short amount of time. Fucking hell, 5 minutes. I didn't know I could talk so much shit. And then I looked at the oil housing, because I wanted to understand where the flow came from. And from Sergio's drawing picture, it shows the oil coming from the pump from them rebates in the block. So that must go to that hole first, and that comes out there to the oil filter first. It doesn't go anywhere else, straight to the filter. So I reckon that's right. Well, it is, because I've fucking put the string in there. Then it gets filtered, and then it goes back in to the housing, and then it comes up into the housing and goes to the cooler. There's no valve or anything in between, that nothing can stop that, so it goes to the cooler first. But what there is on the back side is that's where that valve goes in. Let's see if I can get this right now. On your guide. So that goes in there, and what happens is that oil that's going up there comes up in the housing here, or up in the housing here, and then it doesn't come to hit when it's cold. Yeah, oil is allowed to flow along there and up and into the gallery. So it doesn't get blocked down this port. All three ports are open down the way and then up. So some oil comes in here and then goes up to the oil gallery. When that's shut, it goes round the cooler, comes in this way, then goes up and out there to the thing, so we have got my T-piece on the right side of, compared to this diagram, which is the return. So oil comes from your pump, it actually comes through the filter first, then to the cooler, comes back, and then my T-piece is here and then into the engine. So yeah, I'm happy with where it's plumbed. It's just a case of, what do you think about the check valve? And that was the reason why, when I was saying, fucking hell, 8 minutes in, when I was opening my accusump with the engine off, and I'd got 6 bar of oil stored in the accusump, which I know I have because I've got a valve, a gauge on the oil side. So I turned my tap off while I was at 3,000-4,000 revs, and I stored oil pressure in there. Turn the engine off, and then, to me, if I've got 6 bar in there, engine's not running, open that tap, then your oil pressure should go up to 6 bar or nearabouts. But I was only getting like a bar, maybe even less. But obviously what was happening was the oil pressure's just fucking going back through the cooler and dumping straight into the sump, past the pump. So the check valve will stop that. So it's just depending on what you which way you want to do it. I don't think mine's a bad way, because I'm getting oil to my pump. But yeah, up to you. Fucking hell, 9 minutes. Shut the fuck up. Alright, boys.